Greetings, folks. Ealer here. Wargaming has been very busy in the last few days, putting out a lot of announcements and content on the World of Warships development blog. In fact, I had two videos yesterday, if you haven't seen those, some changes around AA, as well as content that is coming in 097. And then today, July 3rd, Wargaming made a major announcement that I think a lot in the North America community have been kind of anticipating for a while, and that is a split in the U.S. Navy battleship line. And I'm going to say that again, that I think this split was kind of anticipated. Lots of community contributors in North America had sort of hinted at it, that they thought something might be coming, and so on. But Wargaming, their direction on this, I suspect, is not exactly the way that most people, at least in North America, were expecting this might go. So the split specifically is from Tier 8 through Tier 10. The USS Colorado at Tier 7 will remain the same. The USS North Carolina, Iowa, and Montana will also remain the same. What is being added are three new ships at Tier 8, 9, and 10, and the design approach or model for these are, again, quite different from what I think most people were expecting. The USS Kansas at Tier 8, the USS Minnesota at Tier 9, and then the USS Vermont at Tier 10. And then there was also an announcement about a upcoming premium Tier 7 U.S. Navy battleship, the USS Florida. Now, coming back to the tech tree ships, the characteristics apparently of these three ships is that these are going to be quite slow but carry big armament, and they will actually have quite long reload times. So the exact description that Wargaming is using here is, quote, battleships of the new sub-branch will have devastating salvos, but a long main battery reload time, low speed, and relatively light armor. And so for the USS Kansas at Tier 8 and the USS Minnesota at Tier 9, they will have 12 16-inch guns that will have a reload or a base reload of 40 seconds, 40. That is not a mistake. That is the initial intention of this. Now, clearly, the Minnesota being at Tier 9 will have access to the sixth upgrade slot, and therefore can reduce its main battery reload if you take the main battery modification 3 upgrade in slot 6. And then the Vermont will carry also 12 guns, but these will be 18-inch guns, 457 millimeters. And again, the base reload will be 40 seconds. The speed of all three of these ships will be 23 knots. Now, for the Kansas and for the Minnesota, I don't know if that means there will be some sort of stock engine modules that these ships will start with and therefore have a lower base speed than 23 knots. And then you actually have to research or free XP to the upgraded modules for the engines, and then I'm assuming Vermont will have no researchable modules. It'll just be as is. But these ships are going to be very slow, 23 knots, and apparently they are going to be quite fragile. So you can see that they sort of sit very high in the water. They have sort of these very high hull sides. And I don't know if that means that their citadels are going to sit quite high. So while these are sort of very big, lumbering, very large caliber weaponry, but are quite fragile, they're sort of glass cannons in a way. And I think none of these are actual ship designs. And I am not by any means a U.S. Navy ship expert. So if anybody who has expertise or knowledge in this area, feel free to please add your comments in the video comments below to give us your perspective or point us to material that will go into this. Visually, these look like sort of World War One or post World War One super dreadnoughts that have had their casemate guns removed, and then these ships have been modernized for World War Two. We did see that in real life with many of these ships, like the New Mexico, the Colorado, were World War One or shortly after, or interwar period battleships that were upgraded. In fact, the California, which was just released today in the premium shop, is also a modernized version of the actual ship that was restored after the attack on Pearl Harbor. So these are sort of visually look like kind of old style U.S. Navy battleships that have been modernized. So very interesting choice. I would have thought, and I suspect this is going to be the case for lots of people in North America, that the direction wargaming maybe should have gone with this or would have gone with this is to go with like a secondary theme branch and go with real ships that were actually designed and built, but give them secondary flavors. So, for example, at Tier 8, they could have gone with the USS South Dakota, which was the lead of the South Dakota class that the Massachusetts and the Alabama are part of. At Tier 9, they could have gone with like the USS New Jersey or the USS Wisconsin, which were again both Iowa class battleships. Again, they could have gone with a secondary style build. And then presumably at Tier 10, they could have gone with a Montana variant or a clone of the Montana with a secondary build. I think that quite a few people, I suspect, believe that Wargaming would have gone with a different direction than they did on this. So kind of curious. Again, I don't play U.S. Navy battleships too often, so I don't have as strong of a vested emergence in these ships, and I would be very curious to see what regular players of the U.S. Navy battleships think of this design direction. Again, Wargaming announced this upcoming premium Tier 7 U.S. Navy battleship, the USS Florida. Again, this looks like a paper design. It has 3 turrets with quadruple rifles, 14-inch guns, and relatively light armor. So the way that this gets described in the article is that this is sort of in the same style as the premium Tier 8 French battleship Champagne, which has, and the Tier 10 Soviet battleship, the Slava, which are sort of these glass cannons, probably very accurate, but are relatively lightly armored. And so that seems to be the direction that they're going with here. The Florida specifications are a little bit farther down here. It is a more reasonable speed, I think, for most players, 27 knots for a Tier 7 ship. That's certainly going to be welcome over the 21 or 22 knots of the Colorado. But it has access to defensive fire as an additional capability. So all the specifications for these ships, or the initial specifications, are in here. They are, again, 23 knots. They have a reload for the tech tree ships of 40 seconds. It looks like they get the USS Massachusetts style repair party. So they have a shortened cooldown on the reload time of 80 seconds rather than the normal 100 or 120 for other battleship lines. So again, kind of an interesting direction on taking this. And then the last point in this article is just a one-liner about announcement of an upcoming premium German battleship, the Brandenburg, that will be at Tier 8. There are no specifications here. They say that basically the characteristics of the ship are still being worked out, and they'll announce them once they're a little more final. So kind of some interesting news at a minimum, but almost certainly not the direction that I think people were expecting Wargaming was going to go with this announcement. So as always, please do leave your comments below. I'd be curious to know people's thoughts on this in the comments of the video. And as always, we hope to see you out there on the virtual seas, and we wish you happy sailing.